I'm Kat Valyi. I'm the CEO of CV Strategic Marketing Solutions, and this is the Healthcare Marketing Mindset Rehab. It's a space where we discuss how the right mindset and processes can work together to transform your marketing outcomes. I'll also share additional insights and have some special guests that will ultimately help you be a better executive. So let's begin. Today I have a really great guest. This is a great day. I have a great guest. We're going to have a good conversation. This is all about helping the healthcare folks in the B2B space get a different mindset about their marketing. And so my guest today is Michael Sharp from EXOS Advisors. He has a very interesting solution that we're going to talk about how it can help your organization and just learn how sales and marketing can work together. But before we get down that road, I'd love for Michael to share a little bit about himself.
Mission statement is to cause business growth through honoring, lifting, and optimizing people. The key to that is just understanding how people are wired and literally, who am I? So I could answer other things, I could start to answer that question by talking about things personally. Oh, well, I'm a male, I have 3 daughters, enjoy walks on the beach and volleyball and things like that. Those are some
That's
things.
good information too, actually.
Right. I could mention that I'm in a minority in a sorority because, of the daughters and wife. We share people's wired nature, which is a deep part of who they are, regardless of whether they're at home, at work, or if you and I are vacationing in Europe for a couple of weeks. You bring this sense of contribution about who you are. So in the assessment that we use, it's just very quick, accurate, and honoring of people. I would say that I am the presence of knowledgeable, wise power. And that's just kind of the contribution that I bring. But we'll probably get to that later.
Yeah, I love that statement, wired nature, because I think that's the part that a lot of people don't think about when they're bringing individuals in an organization to work on a position or in a position. That wired nature. Could you kind of expand on what wired nature means?
Sure. Well, basically, and if we look at organizations, that leads us to how do we find people that are the right fit? How do we hire the right people? There's all sorts of work around getting people in the right seat on the bus. The key frustration is, how do you do that? What is a system? Well, we have a science and a system that's proven to really work, and people love it. So, when you're talking about the wired nature, there's a notion, Abraham Maslow in psychology, people know about his hierarchy of needs. Not a lot of people know about a work at the end of his life called Toward a Psychology of Being. This is in the 60s. He said there appears to exist an inner bent, a nature or makeup of a person that causes Kat or Michael, Bob, Jane, Bill to want to make a contribution a certain way. And he said it's unchanging. It's a deep part of your core that he said is intrinsic or given or instinctoid. So these are weird words, but what they really mean is, he said that you come in this planet with it. It's not learned. It's not family of origin. It's not something that you pick up in school. It is part of your human existence. It's the very seat of your identity. That's super important because if there is a wired nature makeup, what kind of human being are you? What kind of human being am I? And how do I contribute? That's the key to really solving what we really have a challenge with, especially in organizations. How do we hire people? Well, we hire them based on skills, experience, and do I like you? Do I see myself working for 40 hours around Kat? No, So those have been proven to be very subjective. Skills, experience, and likability. It doesn't work to consistently put people in their calling, alignment, and top performers. So we're missing something about the very presence or wired nature of a person. That's what we address. And if we are doing great with all of this in hiring, then why do we have the 80-20 rule? Why do we have quiet quitting and the great resignation? There's a grand misstewardship of people, and that's what we're addressing.
Yeah, hiring folks, when I used to work in the corporate space, hiring folks was always a challenge. You get a pile of resumes, you get to as many as you can, and then you kind of, start the interview process. And like you were saying, does that person have the skills based on what's on paper, how they answer questions, and do I like them? And sometimes we pick people that are compatible to us which may not be the right compatibility to that job, correct? What are your
Right.
thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's several things you covered there. We have a volume of people that come in, at least usually, maybe recently it's been more candidate centric, but usually you have a lot of people that want an opportunity to gain work and you have no idea of who they are. And so it can be very, very subjective when you're looking at what resume font. Well, I don't like that email address. Did they go to the same school that I did? Oh, well, that's kind of neat. It's very subjective. Another principle that you mentioned is, the idea of connecting with people, or that there's a likability, and people tend to gel with people that are on their wavelength. If they're on my wavelength, then that means their wired nature is similar to mine. That's why we're resonating. But we don't always need another me. Sometimes we need people that are in contrast or the opposite, or even frankly, sometimes the type of person that, I'd never find myself talking to in a social engagement or party, or, oh, one of those types of people. But those types of people can be exactly the energy you need in your organization to fill a role and a contribution that is the opposite of what you'd want to do anyway.
Yeah. You know, one of the things I find myself most concerned with is sales and marketing because, I'm a marketer and I work in the B2B space. And many times sales and marketing well, all the time, sales and marketing should be working very closely together. And I find sometimes there are challenges with that relationship structure. Could it be that there are different types of the right people are not in the right seats, or how can maybe wired nature or your solution kind of help with that?
Yeah, that's part of it, is getting the right person, right seat. We Organizations try, often very hard. Everybody is well intentioned what they're attempting to do. It's just that the result is of these engagement studies and everything continue to show that there's a wide opportunity for improvement. In 2022, the technology should be a lot farther than, the 80/20 rule. So anytime, doesn't matter whether it's sales, marketing, manufacturing, bookkeeping, or people that, do landscape contracting in a backyard. If you have several people in the same role doing the same work, you can start to observe and measure the 80/20 rule, which just means we have A, B, C, D performers. And C performers can be good people. It's not that they're negative or C is failing, but it's that they're heads and shoulders behind A, B performers. It's that human performance bell curve. The 80/20 principle is everywhere. It's never significantly been defeated. What we're showing is that you can measure and quantify how this is happening, why it's there, and what to do to resolve it. And without a better formula, you'll take people that are hardworking, and then you just put them in a role where sometimes the first thing is they need to prove their existence by performing. Actually, that's oftentimes the case. And then it makes sense that if you have non-top performers aren't wired for the work, they're set up for insecurity, defensiveness, even failure, and none of which is their best self. So that puts people in a situation, say, for example, the team of salespeople versus the team of marketing people. And all of them are kind of trying to, cut their teeth or establish themselves or grow. And you have some people that are brilliant top performers, but the people that aren't, it's not that they're less caliber or less intelligence or lacking work ethic. Often they're misaligned and misunderstood of what their wired nature is. But if they're in a seat to try to establish themselves, you're in kind of a little bit of that defensive mode where you're trying to establish yourself. So anything that comes from the other team might be seen as an obstacle or disruption or just not immediately supporting my initiatives at my desk. And that's how you can start sowing the seeds of kind of silos or defensiveness. And so the first thing is know the wired nature of the person. And then the second thing is if you can know that, you can actually open the door to how people honor each other by passing it over the fence, passing it over the fence to the other people and back and forth, and not be surprised by what may come from them. When you know their wired nature, you know what to expect, what types of contributions.
That's interesting because originally I was thinking that, okay, you could use this software solution that you have just to bring in new people, but it also helps you if the folks are already there. Taking this assessment and learning the different wired nature can help you with communication. It's like knowing how to provide the
Right.
right communication style.
Right. Right. You just stop being in the dark and making so many assumptions. And so much of what we do is really based around assumptions. We all do it. I mean, we accept jobs and tasks and things on our plate that actually aren't in alignment for who we are, and we just kind of muddle along. So, kind of an example of this communication in teams is just yesterday, I was speaking with a fellow consultant. We're both working together in an organization, actually, just in separate places. But he was talking about this idea of lateral leadership. It just means that, he's dealing with people that are kind of like leaders in the organization, but anytime leaders in different departments have an issue, like say something's not being done or miscommunication, they go right back up the top and they send an email. And his version of it is saying, look, it's like you've got brothers and sisters here. They're telling on daddy that, my brother didn't do what he was supposed to do. And so he has his way of saying is that he's having a conversation saying, okay, we're going to stop telling daddy. Like, you need to deal with this as a leader or as a manager yourself with you and this other person. You don't need to be rushing everything up. The way that I describe it is, oh yeah, that's a similar thing. But we talk about passing it over the fence. In this case, we call it passing it over the core values fence. The core values is the tool, the advancement that we work with. It's amazing. So when you know your wired nature, your core values, and you know the other person, you can absolutely not only know that you can pass it over the fence, but celebrate that someone else is going to be making that contribution to advance the baton forward in the race. We need people. And you could be passing it over to somebody that's a superior to you, or that's a direct report of you, or lateral leadership. But really, it's delegating who is responsible for what and by when. And this system of core values helps us to know who is equipped to identify to run with that baton. And it purifies business processes and hiring.
Oh, it seems like it might also help with company culture, because that's always a big thing. Having a good culture within an organization. People have been, a couple years ago, so many companies were trying to embrace and do well, and it was a lot of posters and
Right.
parties or get together. But this kind of seems like it takes it into a different level. So this way you can really change mindsets, and get people to communicate better. This is what I'm hearing.
Well, the answer to that would be kind of sorta, does it
Hmm.
address company culture? That's one of those kind of platitudes that gets a lot of attention. It's very easy to be sticky. The idea of what's our company culture? This along the lines of similar platitudes that we toss about, like company mission, vision, values, all that sort of stuff. The company motto, our mission statement that you lock under a banner that on your company when you come on site. The honest truth is, Kat, is that those are not things that get people up in the morning. When you get up in the morning, there's a number one thing, whether it's in your marriage, dealing with parenting, friendships, socially, or certainly in the workplace that you're spending so much time during the working day. It's one thing. Am I contributing? Do people understand me? Am I of value? That is the number one thing that gets everybody up in the morning. I am doing something that is in alignment with me. I resonate with it and it makes a difference. So company culture is something that people try to address to get people along, and it can help. But those things, as well as employee satisfaction surveys and great place to work awards, they help, but they're not the center of it. So I would say that company culture is made up of a number of individuals all added up together, and we missteward and misunderstand how the individuals are wired. So we're often pushing or pulling amongst a central top-down kind of strategy, when the biggest E on the eye chart in opportunity is that companies and leaders are very much in the dark about the wired nature of people and where they want to gravitate, what lane of how they want to contribute. So we address company culture directly by honoring each individual that we can now put into the company culture, the coach training, the culture to help everyone understand others of how they are uniquely wired. And that together makes everybody feel like there's a sense of belonging. They're valued by their coworkers. And by the way, the McKinsey report released a study, 80% of the reasons roughly why people are leaving their jobs, it's not these draconian things about compensation got poached and all this stuff. They did a study where employers think that those are the reasons. Oh, and better benefits, things like that. But the employees' reasons were all about sense of belonging, valued by my manager, valued by my team. It's all about contribution and value at an individual level, nothing about the big company mission and company organizational plan.
Hmm. That's a
Nobody mentioned mission, vision, values is the
Yeah,
reason
that's
at my
interesting.
work, the reason why I'm quitting.
Yeah.
Nobody mentioned company culture. They didn't talk about these giant, open systems. They talked about me as a human being. Am I valid? Am I contributing?
Hmm. So, if you were going into an organization that had a slightly dysfunctional sales and marketing, how would you approach introducing your solution, and how do you think it might help?
Hmm. The number one thing that I approach with anyone that I'm dealing with is straight to the bottom line. We're so crammed full of information and streaming services, of videos and audios, and people sending information on to our email box that's crowded, or our LinkedIn feed that's full of people saying stuff. Everybody has so much competing for their attention span. They're just overwhelmed always, all the time. I mean, you can't even get a hold of some people in clients just because they're so busy putting out fires or running around with initiatives. So the number one thing that I address is, how can I help your average day? What is on your front burner? And underneath what we do is one primary thing. Uh, no matter where we're at, we're always dealing with people issues or people challenges. It's not always negative. Sometimes it's just communication or getting to the next level. And sometimes it's your basic stuff with people issues, like trying to get people aligned. The top problems in all businesses usually go back to people. So if we're going into like a sales team, the first thing I'm addressing is, where are you at? I don't know if I have a company that's fast growth, that's throwing everybody at the wall and needs systems for employment pre-screening, or I have a very established company that has low turnover and they need to increase performance. So I'll go and look at, well, what's your initiatives? But I'll look for any kind of patterns, and we'll always find them, about how to steward people better and quantify their very human nature.
Yeah, I like that. Look for the patterns. I guess you start with an assessment. That's always the best way to begin. So once you help, and number one, I had the opportunity, you gave me the opportunity to take the assessment, and it was really not painful, because when you first said it, I was like, okay, it's going to be fun. I thought it
Right.
was going to, it really wasn't painful. And interestingly enough, it really kind of pinpointed my, I guess, wired nature correctly. And then you could see why I was going into different fields all these years. But do you feel that there's a direct connection? Because ultimately, all organizations, especially when you get to the higher level, and then you get to the board, and
Mhm.
maybe whoever is providing the additional funds for the company, it's all comes down to revenue. Do you think that having this type of thought process and mindset weaved into the organization for hiring practices, or for helping people communicate, do you think, or have you seen it have a direct connection to improved growth and revenue? Because ultimately,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely does. The number one way to address or turn around a company, and this work has been deployed in the most serious situation. The number one thing that you have to do is purify or replicate what's working well. And when you're dealing with labor, employee compensation, base salaries, bonuses, benefits, that is the number one cost and number one risk or asset in any business. The labor, the workforce, the leadership, all those salaries and fully burdened compensations. So if you are addressing the need for either making that more efficient, or saying you don't need to hire 15 people to wait for, the five that are going to make it, or the three, you're addressing it on the cost side, but you're also addressing the performance side for people that are already in the seat. That new alignment for virtually no new dollars of hiring people. When you align them better, you get an increase in performance. That passes directly to the bottom line. So you're addressing both sides in operations of an organization: the cost side of labor or expense, or the cost of training or onboarding or doing more training or more strategic plans or more initiatives or more shiny objects. And at the same token, actually having a connection of engagement, job, person, fit, down to the individual level, that passes directly to the bottom line, because you're working with the energy that's there. So when you mentioned earlier, yeah, so you start with an assessment. That is what we're starting with. The first ever tool to measure the unchanging nature of a person, the core values of a person. It only takes 10 minutes. So first of all, a lot of leaders, just like yourself, they're over-assessed. They're drawn into a lot of these complicated 360-degree processes, and some of these assessments take an hour or more each. This is a 10-minute instrument. There's no questions and silly situations, puzzles, IQ tests, brain teasers, nothing to help, poke at somebody. It's simply a list of small list of words that has been proven to go back to identify the deep drivers of a person that doesn't change. So it's 10 minutes. From there, you look at the human capital energy, the strengths they have to contribute, the dormant human capital you're not using, and what you're doing that plops tasks on their desk that are not in alignment with their core values nature, even though they may agree to do it. Maybe that's stuff that's better to take 15% of their work past over the fence, the core values fence, to someone that's wired to do that work, and the whole team elevates. That's what we do to really approach it. So it does absolutely go to the bottom line. It saves cost of employment pre-screening. We're half the cost of a staffing company when we use it in hiring. And we're tapping engagement of the individual, which is the great challenge every organization has, to increase engagement and align people to the nature of their work.
So I can see employing your solution almost before the stuff hits the fan in an organization. But do you find that it's also like, because if an organization is having challenges, like, their numbers are not where they need to be, and people there seems to be not great communication, or there's a lot of pointing fingers, like, you're not giving me enough brochures and you're not reading the stuff and things like that. Do you find that this still is like, how would it, is it worth bringing it in at that point too, or is it better to bring a solution like this, beforehand, like when you're building your team? Where have you seen it work? Is it both, or?
Well, it's better ahead of time, because anytime you are building a team, you're rolling the dice of assigning someone to a role. And anybody on the planet that says they do that perfectly every time, let me know who you are. You can start streaming what you do, right? So that's the message. So we're always rolling the dice. In employment pre-screening, we're always rolling the dice. There's one company that did commercial carpet sales, and the guy told me that it takes a year before he figures out, after he hired the person, whether they're a top performer. It's so much of a long sales cycle, relationally based, and heavy investing in training. That just sounds crazy to me. I'm sorry, but it just sounds crazy that you don't know. Meanwhile, you're paying a base salary or whatever. So when you look at these systems, I would say anywhere there's a opportunity to cause the greater stewardship of people is where it fits, and that's virtually everywhere. So at the beginning, you're dealing with the cost and the risk and the unknown side. Then it's more valuable. But if you're dealing with existing employees, there's plenty of opportunity there as well. I did a study with it was actual engagement, rather, instead of research. It was engagement with about 200 employee companies, about 30 VPs. And I did a simple human capital study with them and worked with them one-on-one. And I found that they were misaligned about 35%. And that's not even bad. But multiply that out, 35% of your labor times however many hours, times however many people, times however long. And you start adding up that there's a lot to capture. One individual, it was a woman that was a VP that was misaligned 65% of her day. She had a giant core values capacity that was not being asked for and used. She wanted to, and it was part of her job. She just couldn't fit it in, because most of her job was engaged in problem solving, and it was in product development. So instead of being a relational building person, which is what she preferred in sales and product development, she was, instead of building relationships, she was stuck on the triage, the product side, problem solving, constant iteration, software developments, and obstacles. And that was a small part of her energy that was dragging her dry. So you just look at that and you just start to look at ways that you can improve it. And it releases people, because you're speaking to the number one thing anybody wants, which is to be known and validated for who I am. And you just look for that opportunity. It becomes an intentional process. It's very accurate and very positive.
Do you find that organizations that employ your solution, do they have happier employees? Does it help with retention, like people stay, or do they take this information and go? What have you seen?
Well, EXOS Advisors is not a research company. So when we speak about what we found, it's actual situations, not peer-reviewed journals and armies of kind of like college studies of material and study. What it is actual real-world experience. So I can tell you an example of a church. We're talking a nonprofit here, hiring a worship pastor. So what do you do to quantify top performance of a worship pastor? Okay, because in sales, we all know sales is the top job that everybody walks in and usually has some sort of measurement or board they all stare at, and they know what their place is more than any other job. But you can quantify top performing in bookkeeping, in IT code writers, in cybersecurity folks, in help desk consultants, in customer service, in leadership, in any level, or in a nonprofit, or as a worship pastor. And so basically, we went through a process that reduced the interview time by about 60, 70% that the lead pastor would have done. And also the expenses, because if you go to some very tight knit organization like a church, it's almost like family. Hiring a key person and a staff about 5 or 6, by the way, very small, that's almost like inviting someone into your family. It's like courtship. So they pay for hotels and some plane flights to have someone kind of come in and woo. So instead of doing that for 5 or 6 or 8 people, they only had to do it for one person. We had 2 final interviews and 8 initial interviews. Before that process, that pastor would have had probably 15, 20 interviews, inviting other people in, and 6, 7, 8 final interviews. So this is a fraction of it. They hired the person, and 2 years later, the person is still there and fully engaged in the work because of the science of matching the nature of the person to the nature of the work. We call that a top performer profile. That's what we do in that organization. It screened away a huge bulk of what he would have done ahead of time, and the person's still there and is very happy.
So you're actually also not only looking at the type of work, so a pastor, but you're looking at the relationship within that particular organization, because I guess it would be different from one organization to the next, correct?
You got it. Look at sales. A salesperson is a salesperson is a salesperson. I'm not to disparage other assessments out there, but this is an advancement. And why are we using assessments or tools that have been around for 30 or 40 or 50 years? Are you using the same cell phone? Are you driving the same car? Does your television look the same as it did 25 or 65 years ago? If it doesn't, then why aren't we applying that in human engineering and honoring people? So one of the older assessments says that a salesperson is a salesperson. That's not true. There's no way that you're going to tell me that an inside salesperson making cold calls and software as a service all day long is the same nature of the work as an outside salesperson that's a residential real estate person showing, first-time home buyers around homes. Completely different. So when you look at a different nature of things, what you're really revealing is a very simple, it's not complicated. It's not about company culture and all these swirling dynamics that add both. It's about one thing: know the nature of a person. That's a 10-minute tool. And then all I need is the other side of the equation, because there's a lot of good tools that tell us something about the other person. Ours is more accurate by the repeatability by far, but you also need to know the other side of the equation. So when assessments are even used in hiring, they're generally used at the end, and it's very subjective. They only pay money on a few people at the end because it seems expense. Our process completely does it differently. Give it out to everybody for employment pre-screening. There's the cost is wrapped into the initial engagement, so there's no cost per each. So you can send out to hundreds of people, and then all you need to know is the other side of the equation, which is what is the nature of the work. Just like in sales, all sales are not the same. All marketing is not the same. Are you doing with visual advertising, or are you doing with creator social media marketing in the digital space? Are you dealing with something conceptual? Or are you dealing with something visceral or visual? Those are all different natures of the work that can still be a similar job title. And you look at a worship pastor as an example that I mentioned. Part of the nature of this is, what is the nature of a worship pastor? Are you basically just performing music and helping to usher people into a certain presence and experience that's key to that? Or are you a leader of teams in a growing organization that's actually training other worship teams of volunteers? That's a team builder. That's not just a performer. Or are you a coach or a small group leader? The nature of a worship pastor can be technical, behind the desk, facilitating programs and leading and managing a team. It can be a songwriter or a creative that's producing content, or it can be a team builder or a relational shepherd that really is about scalability, empowering others, and finding their potential, like a life coach or a leadership coach. The nature of the work is completely different. So we quantify that for that organization, because they can go to a church across the street and the nature of the work can be markedly different, even though the job title is the same. You have to have a scientific process that boils all employment selection down to 2 things: nature of the person, how well do you fit with the wired fit of your wired nature to the wired nature of the work that I need, which is why I'm paying a salary in an organization, to get an ROI and a contribution out. So I need to quantify that. And how we quantify it's very loose and very subjective. And that's the problem that we have with the great attrition or quiet quitting and all this misstewardship. And a lot of what we do, Kat, in organizations is ultimately behavior modification. You talked about communication. You talked about trying to get people to do this or fill out that form or document. It's behavior modification and communication, all that stuff I call the soft skills. There's plenty of stuff that's been done and plenty of stuff that's better than us at soft skills and training and all that kind of stuff. But we're dealing with something different. It's the nature that is not looked at, not understood, and certainly not intentional in organizations.
Yeah, that's a good point. I remember I was working in an organization, and that whole process about the thought process, sales is sales. And they brought in a young lady who her background was not in healthcare B2B sales. It was in working in real estate at an apartment, and she did great in that environment. There was a different type of communication and so on, but the thought process was, oh, she's in sales. She did great there. Wonderful lady. Let's bring her in here. And they brought her in, and the on ramp, runway to get her started was very short. Just hit the ground running, and it didn't. It was very difficult for her, which made her seem like she wasn't a good salesperson because she wasn't doing what the company needed. But in fact, it was, I think, exactly what you're talking about, the nature of her wired nature versus the nature of the organization. So this is a really, you see it all the time. So this is an interesting thought process about having a solution. So let me let me ask you this, and to kind of wrap it up. So what's the ultimate goal? What makes you happy about this organization and this solution that you're providing? And what are your hopes that organizations learn from what you're sharing today?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what makes me happy is that I get up and I get to illuminate and add clarity with my wired nature, which is a little analytical and a little balanced. But I've always had the ability to talk shop or lingo and to make connections between what could be completely disparate sectors or verticals and distill it down to the brass tacks, the commonality. So I simply found an advancement that we've been working forward and working with, and it's changed my life. I get the opportunity to share this with people, some of which are not even a fit for my organization, but I can't say no to giving people the information about how you're wired. People often find that they know some degree of this, but no one's spoken to them about it in this way, with this clarity that, by the way, doesn't know them. So people say all the time with this tool and how I'm able to debrief with it, eerily accurate. It's like you're reading my mail. You are under the hood. How are you doing this? Another married couple in business with a networking group that's growing in business said that the wife said, it's like you're on our walls, because I was describing the damage between the husband and wife. So I've ended up, helping marriages tremendously, identifying clarity of people. There was a gentleman that was trained through major leaders, I won't mention their name, in a major assessment that he's used for years. And after 40 years of marriage, he said, this core values tool taught me something about my marriage and how to honor my wife that it had not been revealed to me through all of that.
Wow.
So that's the kind of advancement. I really enjoy sharing something that is of immediate value to people. I offer that to anybody. You can go to our website at exosadvisors.com. Just reach out to us. And as well, if you want, I can maybe put in a post or the chat the link for someone to take the tool for free. Again, it's only 10 minutes. I'll just put it in the chat window. And the idea here is to go into organizations and show how to make a difference straight to the bottom line based on whatever their needs are, because it's likely that the people side is part of that. And I just think about the application all the time. I'm applying it with my own daughters, one of which, my youngest, hasn't even taken CVI, this core values tool, but she knows these wired natures. She's putting it to work, and she sees it in her classmates in the 5th and 6th grade. She sees these core drivers. That is the mission that I want, is that organizations can know how to honor and steward their people, because they can know them at a deeper level than skills, experience, performance, soft skills, communication, all these initiatives, and how you're doing on behavior modification. Organizations can know so much more deeply that they can be benevolent and intentional in stewarding their people, which falls right through to engagement, profit, and being the best place to work from a whole new level.
Wow. I took, like I mentioned before, I took the test and it was really painless. It was, I really thought it was going to be just like so many of these assessment tests that I've taken in the past. And I thought that it was illuminating. So I would say take Michael up on his offer if you can, because it's worth just taking the test to seeing it. And the other thing is, I like people are always trying to find ways how to take the guesswork out of hiring and try to take
Right,
that subjective part. So if this
right.
can help do that, that's quite interesting. So I thought this was when we talked offline, I just loved this conversation. And the more I thought about it, I thought about the whole sales and marketing aspect of how to get the teams to work together and learning how to understand the wired nature of the people you're working with. I think would just be so helpful to make communication better, because ultimately you want sales to work in lockstep with marketing in order to
Right.
grow the company. So anything you can do. So this way you have that. No executive wants to deal with the infighting. Sales is pointing here, marketing is pointing there, and pop. It's just a waste of time and energy where you want a harmonious team. This is a way to get there, at least one way to get there. So
Part of the classic things I think we can hopefully agree, regardless of our background, creed, perspective, there's a universal dynamic that you just tend to get. It's basically marketing versus sales. It could be the same as husband versus wife, or leader versus direct reports, or this person versus that person, or me versus my sibling, or my perspective versus your perspective. And it all boils down to this. This is the pattern: me versus you. And a lot of us are trying to contribute our best. And then when that comes at us as maybe not received, or we can feel threatened, and then we can get in trying to defending me, and not necessarily negatively or bad attitude. You're just naturally trying to protect your existence and contribute your best. Well, if the other person is trying the exact same thing, but they end up conflicting or competing, that's where we get stuck in this miasma of social complex initiatives, behavior, personality, all of that, when really we can address the me versus you by knowing who I am, knowing what I'm not, and really honoring you by knowing who you are and what I can expect for you, and vice versa. And that doesn't matter which dynamic are you going across, drawing those lines in an organization. We're all human beings at the end of the day, and we have a wired nature and a way to contribute. And that's what we see, because to elevate, the biggest thing that we offer, Kat, is clarity and awareness on the biggest thing that's already there with people, how they're wired. You just experienced it, and then we talked about it, and finally says, hey, let's do a podcast on this.
yeah.
What we're addressing is the polarization separation. I say, I don't know if this is super exaggerated, but I really believe outside of the Civil War, it seems like this is a period in our nation where there's so much division. And you can draw all the lines that we all know about, but it seems like this versus the other. It's almost like we fight harder when we're fighting over one of two options. If there was 15 options, we'd be watered down, wouldn't fight as much. But it's me versus you. And in the pandemic, there are two new dynamics that we are fighting over: mask versus no mask, vaccine versus no vaccine. It's polarizing. And the more pure the polarization, the harder you fight. This tool interrupts that, says, look, it's not about me versus you. It's about which type of contribution is needed. We can both find that journey together and be, not have an ego about if it's not me. Because honestly, when you're asking me to be something I'm not, I don't want to be held to that standard anyway. I'd rather be celebrated for what I have, for what is my strengths already.
I used to, and sometimes I still do it now, put together sales and marketing retreats. Every year we would have one of them in our corporate space where we would bring all the sales and marketing and even operations in. You know, if I would have known about a tool like this then, I would have put that as part of the curriculum, because we would, you're trying to get people together so this way they could work better, get them to know each other. Plus, you take a lot of, do a lot of sessions and education. And I think that if I would have had this tool then, I would have introduced this over and over and over every year to help people, because I think ultimately it would do exactly what we'd want the events to do, and probably save time on money and liquor and food. Things like that we
We'll
were
save liquor for the
hoping would
celebration,
do
right?
the job.
Yeah, have liquor for the celebrations, but not for the medication and coping.
Right.
Right? So, yeah, that is so important, and it's really what gets me up during the day because I have something that I've been steeped in my own personal life and leadership, whether nonprofits or organizations. It's fun to show all sorts of organizations what we do in the employment pre-screening. But really, this tool is not very well known. It was born out of a quiet consultancy of turnaround management. If you know what turnaround management consulting is, those are the most distressed businesses that are broken and need to be turned around. They can't study it for a year and throw hundreds of thousands of dollars at something. You've got to make a difference to the bottom line in operations. That forced urgency and forced simplification that is a purity of what this tool is. It doesn't take an hour. It doesn't cause somebody to be exasperated, but it gets to the core of what we all want, is to be validated for who we are. So to some degree, there's only about 1.5 million of these assessments that have been completed throughout about 20 or so years. So it's not a blip on the radar. But for those that want to look at new innovations and inventions out there, I will share something with you and tell you it's 20 to 40 percentage points higher on its consistency than all the gold standards of the last century. Now, I don't care if you're selling gas or you're building houses or you are out there writing computer code, no matter what you're doing, if you're doing it 20, 30, 40 percentage points cheaper, faster, better, you have a market advantage. So that's what I love to do is I get up every day and share this with people. I'm looking for the people that either want to add it as a tool to their toolkit or people that want to have us come in and do our in and out diagnostic operational bottom line stuff to fix this. And it's a lot of fun.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Michael. This was very helpful, and I love this conversation. I could talk about it for hours. Maybe we'll talk again. But thank you again for everyone. This is Michael Sharp. He is with EXOS Advisors. And if you want to learn, I'll make sure that at the end of this podcast, I'm going to put information about the free assessment and his website. It's really cool and he's a great guy to talk to. So just reach out and communicate with
I
him.
appreciate it. Thanks, Kat, for having me. Yeah, check it out and reach out to me. I'll provide a free debrief for anyone, 15, 30, 45 minutes, particularly if you're struggling with that secret sauce of how to understand and honor people. This is frankly liberating. It's a lot of fun. So I appreciate your time and having me, Kat.
Thank you so much for joining me today for another episode of the Healthcare Marketing Mindset Rehab. This was a great discussion with Michael Sharp. I love the whole conversation about learning someone's wired nature and how that fits into the organization so this way people could work together better. And I will, if you wait, you'll see the link, and I'll also have it down below for EXOS Advisors, so you can take the free assessment. I would suggest you try it. I'm telling you, 10 minutes, and it's quite interesting. So anyway, thank you again for joining me for another episode of the Healthcare Marketing Mindset Rehab. I'm Kat Valyi. I'm the CEO of CV Strategic Marketing Solutions. I help healthcare B2B solution organizations transform their marketing so this way they can have better growth and marketing outcomes. Thanks so much.